to the Wisdom by Harry YouTube channel. My name is Harry.
And I'm Mary. We're so excited to have you here today for another fascinating episode.
Today we are going to try to really get to the bottom of something that's been in the headlines a lot lately, those tariff decisions and how they're shaking up the global economy. We've got a really interesting article here from March 7th, 2025 that gives us like a play-by-play of the market chaos and all the expert opinions flying around. So yeah, buckle up, because I think this is going to be one of those episodes where you walk away saying, whoa, I did not realize that.
You hit the nail on the head. There is a lot to unpack, especially with all the recent back and forth on tariffs, the ones targeting Canada and Mexico. Those delays, even though they seem positive at first glance, actually create a huge amount of uncertainty in the system.
It's like trying to plan a road trip when you're not even sure if your car is going to start right. But why is this uncertainty so bad for global markets? We know it's bad, but how bad are we talking?
Okay, so think of it this way. Businesses, right? They rely on plans and forecasts. They need to know what's coming to make investments, hire people, just to function. When you throw in these unpredictable tariff threats, it's like pulling the rug out from under them. Suddenly, the cost of materials could go way up, or access to their key markets, poof, gone. That's a recipe for, economic gridlock.
And we're seeing this play out in Europe right now, right? The article mentions some pretty big drops in the major stock markets over there. Germany's DAX, France's CAC 40, they're all feeling the pressure. Even the FTSE 100, it looks like it's headed for its worst week of the entire year.
It's a total chain reaction happening globally. And those drops in Europe, they're basically mirroring what we're seeing here in the US with the S&P 500 also going down. This anxiety around tariffs, it's contagious, spreading across borders and making businesses everywhere nervous, like battening down the hatches, waiting for those disruptions and rising costs.
Yeah, it really is amazing how interconnected everything is. But here's what I don't get. Amidst all this market turmoil, the euro is actually getting stronger. It's at a 4-month high against the US dollar. Can you explain that, because it seems totally backwards to me?
It does seem counterintuitive, but there is a reason behind it. Currency values, they're influenced by a lot of different things. But one big one right now is that people are expecting interest rates to go up in Europe. This is partly because of the increase in defense spending, which we'll talk about later. But basically, higher interest rates make the euro more attractive to investors who are, always looking for better returns on their money.
So it's like a seesaw, right? Uncertainty weakens the US dollar, and at the same time, those higher returns in Europe make the euro stronger.
Exactly. And it's not just interest rates. People are also getting worried that the US economy might slow down because of these trade wars. And a weaker economic outlook, that can also push a currency down.
Okay, so we've got markets going haywire, currencies doing their own thing, and then you've got this whole blame game happening on top of everything. The article mentions globalists being blamed for all the market turmoil. Can you explain what that even means?
Yeah. So let's start with globalism, right? What is that even? It's basically this idea that different countries' economies, they're all intertwined, and international trade is, in the end, good for everyone. It's all about collaboration and depending on each other on a global scale.
Got it. So would the opposite of that be protectionism? Like when a country tries to shield its own industries from competition coming from other countries?
Exactly. And that's where things get complicated. Some people argue that these protectionist policies, like tariffs, they end up hurting everyone involved because they mess with established trade flows and they make prices go up. Others believe that it's necessary to protect jobs and industries within a country, even if it means some short-term pain.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough debate with good points on both sides. Speaking of complicated things, let's talk about defense spending. The article mentions European countries, especially Germany, they're increasing their defense budgets a lot. Why is everyone suddenly spending so much more on their military?
Well, it's partly a reaction to some questions that have come up about commitments to allies. This increase in defense spending, it's like European countries saying, hey, we're serious about our own security, even without relying on other global powers.
So more defense spending, stronger euro, at least for now. But what about the long term? Are there any downsides to all this?
Well, there could be. You know how a country's budget is kind of like a household budget? You've only got so much money to spend.
Yeah.
So when you decide to spend more in one area, like on defense, you usually have to cut back somewhere else, like maybe education, healthcare, things like that. It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not just about the immediate economic hit, but also about what we might have to sacrifice down the line. Like you said, it really is like this giant game of economic chess where every move has these ripple effects across the whole board.
Exactly. And in this game, investor confidence is like the key piece. The article I was reading, it quotes these analysts who say that investors are just overwhelmed right now with how much economic news is coming out and how fast it's all happening. It's like information overload, but on a global scale.
I can't even imagine trying to keep up with all that.
Yeah.
But how does that sense of being overwhelmed actually affect how markets behave?
Well, when investors aren't sure about what the future holds, they get really cautious. They're less likely to make big investments. And that hesitation, well, it can kind of spread throughout the economy, slowing down growth and sometimes even leading to a recession.
So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Right.
Like just being afraid of economic instability could actually end up causing it.
You got it. And those analysts we talked about earlier, they're already saying that global growth is going to be weaker because of those tariffs the U.S. put on China and the delayed impact of Germany upping its spending.
It's amazing how it's all connected, right? From tariffs to defense budgets to investor confidence. It's like this tangled web of cause and effect. And it's not just the stock markets feeling the pressure, right? The article mentions that the NASDAQ, which is full of tech companies, has entered a correction. Could you break down what that means for us?
Sure. Basically, a correction is when the stock market goes down by 10% or more from its highest point recently. It's a pretty big drop, and it tells us that investors are feeling differently than they were before.
So not a total crash, but definitely something to be concerned about, especially because the tech sector has been doing so well lately.
Right. And there's another area that's being affected, oil prices. They've gone down quite a bit recently.
Why is that? I always thought that oil was supposed to be a safe bet when things are uncertain.
Yeah, usually it is, but this time it's different. The uncertainty around global trade is actually a big factor. When businesses are worried about trade wars and the economy slowing down, they tend to scale back what they're doing, and that means they need less oil.
So it's like a domino effect, right? One economic shakeup can lead to all sorts of consequences in different sectors.
Exactly. But even with all this bad news, there's one surprising bright spot: Bitcoin. Even though the markets are down overall, Bitcoin prices have gone way up.
Really? That's kind of shocking. Aren't cryptocurrencies supposed to be even more unpredictable than the regular markets?
Sometimes they are, but Bitcoin has always been kind of a wild card, especially when things are uncertain globally. The article I was reading said that this recent surge is probably because the U.S. announced that it's creating a strategic crypto reserve.
A crypto reserve?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. So even with all this economic turmoil, there are still some assets that manage to do well.
That's right. And that's what makes economics so fascinating. It's always changing, and there's so many different factors that can affect things in predictable and unpredictable ways.
I think that's a good reminder that we can't just look at the headlines. We have to dig deeper, understand the nuances, and connect the dots to really get what's happening in the world around us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that's what we're trying to do here, give you the tools and knowledge you need to make sense of this crazy economic world.
So let's wrap things up. We've covered a lot today, from the immediate impact on the markets to the potential long-term consequences of these tariff decisions. What are the key things you want our listeners to take away from this conversation? It's like we just took a crash course in the global economy, from stock markets taking a nosedive to the euro getting stronger. We even talked about Bitcoin going crazy.
And we're not done yet, are we? We've talked about the immediate reactions, but what about the lasting effects of all these tariff decisions? What should our listeners be thinking about as all this keeps happening?
That's the big question, right? What are the ripples we might see down the road?
Well, this uncertainty could actually, completely change how global trade and international relations work. For example, how will all this tension affect the alliances and partnerships that are already in place? Could this lead to, more regional trade blocs where countries are less reliant on global trade?
It's like we're at a fork in the road, and the direction we choose now could have a huge impact on the future.
That's exactly it. And we have a responsibility, as informed citizens, to be part of these conversations, to really look at the information we have and make smart decisions that help create a more stable and prosperous future for everyone.
Well said. I think that's the perfect way to wrap things up. And for our listeners, remember that this deep dive is really just a glimpse into a much bigger and constantly changing story. We really encourage you to keep exploring this topic, look for different viewpoints, and never stop asking questions.
Curiosity and critical thinking, those are how we can really understand this complex world we live in.
Couldn't agree more. Until next time, happy deep diving, everyone.